Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world. The paths canon never walked. The choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences, slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. The story of Harry Potter's first year at Hogwarts is told as a tale of corridors and curiosities, of a forbidden third-floor door and a glittering stone hidden behind enchantments. They are wrong. In this timeline, the defining image of 1991 is not a boy facing a mirror that shows his parents, but an 11-year-old standing alone in a flooded bathroom, breathless, as porcelain grinds aside and a sink yawns open like a stone iris into the dark. The air tastes of rust and rot. The pipes hum with a voice only he can hear. He has just hissed a word he does not understand into the metal, and the castle has obeyed. Parseltongue, a secret older than the school itself, answers a child who still sleeps in a cupboard's memory. We begin in medias res, at the wrong mystery solved with terrifying efficiency. This is not the slow breadcrumb trail of the Philosopher's Stone, where Halloween trolls, midnight duels, and a three-headed dog gently usher him toward heroism. This is a vertical plunge. The night after patrol, still shaken, still wired, Harry follows the whisper in the walls past Myrtle's aimless sobbing, traces the resonance through the plumbing with a Gryffindor's reckless instinct, and finds not detention-level danger, but a war buried beneath the foundations of the school. In canon, the Chamber of Secrets is a legend deferred, a second-year escalation. Here, it is the first door he truly opens. The world believes his first year is about a stone and a professor with someone else's face on the back of his head. In this timeline, they are wrong again. The stone is a decoyed puzzle. The chamber is the axis. Because when an 11-year-old discovers that his mouth can command Slytherin's hidden fortress, the question is no longer whether he will protect a trinket of alchemical power, but what, exactly, he is. Imagine the collision of enemies reordered. Before Harry meets Voldemort's shade in Quirrell's turban, he meets the basilisk in the depths, ancient, coiled, a weapon being polished in the dark by centuries of silence. One wrong glance, and the story ends as a child's corpse on wet stone. One accidental word, and the deadliest creature in Hogwarts becomes his first mirror. Does the Serpent recognize a familiar soul resonance in the boy who speaks its language, or does it simply wait for the order to kill? The stakes realign with methodical certainty. If Harry's defining first-year confrontation is not with a parasitic Dark Lord over a philosopher's toy, but with Slytherin's own legacy answering to his voice, then Dumbledore's quiet calculations shatter. The staff do not merely have a famous orphan, they have the living key to a mythic weapon sealed under their students' feet. Quirrell's plot, Ron and Hermione's friendship, Draco's house loyalties, everything is forced to orbit a different center of gravity. This is the Slytherin timeline of his childhood. When the darkest door in Hogwarts opens a year ahead of schedule, and a boy who should have been a simple Gryffindor hero is revealed, instead as a masterpiece to be molded. What happens to Hogwarts, to Dumbledore's plans, and to Voldemort's return when the chamber not the stone, claims Harry Potter first. Rewinding the timeline, the tiny choice that breaks canon. The night fixes itself easily in canon memory. Halloween of Harry's first year, the night of the mountain troll. Gryffindor has just broken 3 school rules and saved 1 classmate, and the castle hums with a low-grade panic that even first years can taste in the stone. In the official story, the danger ends at the bathroom door. They are wrong. In the Slytherin timeline, the troll is only the prelude. The staff are stretched thin, patrols rerouted, prefects snapping at stragglers as they herd them back to their dormitories. Harry lies in his 4-poster in Gryffindor Tower, adrenaline still burning under his skin, replaying the way Ron's spell shattered the Trolls Club and the way Hermione had lied to protect them. Sleep does not come. Restlessness does. Canon tells us Harry's curiosity drives him toward the forbidden 3rd-floor corridor, toward the Mirror of Erised, toward every half-whispered rumor of danger that promises answers about who he is. In this timeline, that same gravitational pull simply tilts a few degrees. Instead of turning left toward the tower's stairs, he slips out alone, invisibility cloak still folded at the bottom of his trunk, relying only on the castle's shadows and the chaos of post-troll patrols to conceal him. The corridors are half-lit, pools of torchlight, separated by long stretches of darkness and echo. In one of those stretches, near the girls' bathroom where Hermione almost died an hour earlier, Harry hears it, a hiss, low and sinuous, riding the pipes. Not English, not exactly sound, but a vibration that brushes the edges of comprehension, a soul resonance that makes the hair on his arms stand up. He freezes, listens, follows. He ducks into Moaning Myrtle's bathroom to avoid Filch's lantern, pressing his back to the cold tiles as the caretaker mutters about dunderheads and broken taps. The door swings shut. Silence returns. Then the voice comes again, clearer now, threading through the plumbing, promising movement, hunger, release. Harry has already followed disembodied whispers once, toward a locked door and a 3-headed dog. Here, the same reckless instinct redirects his attention to the sinks, to the serpentine etchings on an otherwise ordinary tap, to the sense that the castle itself is speaking in a language just beyond reach. Frustration breaks his caution. He mutters at the wall, "What are you saying? Come out then." And the words slip, mid-syllable, into Parseltongue. It is not a decision. It is an uncoiling. The sound that leaves his mouth is alien and intimate at once. A hiss that feels like power scraping against his teeth. Stone moves. The sink shudders and spirals away, revealing a gaping shaft where plumbing should be. The floor rearranges itself in obedience to an 11-year-old's voice. Harry staggers back, heart pounding, more shaken by the castle's response than by the Trolls Club or Hagrid's 3-headed guardian. Hogwarts, which had seemed a fortress of neutral stone and portraits, has just answered him like a door recognizing its master. From this moment, the axis of his year tilts. The 3-headed dog and the whispered rumors of a hidden stone become background noise, a secondary puzzle. The open maw of the chamber, unknown, unnamed, promising secrets about his own impossible language, becomes the true center of gravity. While Quirrell continues his quiet war for the Philosopher's Stone, Harry's attention is already descending into older darkness. The next phase of this timeline begins not with a chessboard or a mirror, but with a boy at the edge of a vertical tunnel, realizing the castle's deepest legend has just answered to him. Descent. Before destiny, Harry's first journey into the chamber. He goes down alone, not as a hero on a quest, not yet, but as a boy who has asked a question in a dead language and watched porcelain and brass rearrange themselves to obey. The sync irises open with mechanical grace, revealing a vertical throat of stone, and for one suspended heartbeat, Harry considers calling a teacher. He does not. Curiosity, in this timeline, is already a weapon being polished in the dark. He steps forward and drops. The pipe swallows him in a rush of cold air and accelerating gravity. He is no longer in a school, but inside the plumbing of a legend. Slime-slick walls whip past his fingers when he tries to slow himself, the motion closer to a Quidditch dive than a fall. And the sound is a continuous metallic roar as he ricochets off ancient bends. The stench hits next, stale, mineral water layered with something reptilian and old, a musk that speaks of coils and patience and centuries of waiting. When he finally explodes out onto rough stone, the impact drives the breath from his lungs and leaves a hollow, echoing silence. It is that silence that defines the descent beneath Hogwarts. His own breathing comes back to him, doubled, then tripled, as if the tunnels are considering him from multiple angles. A thin ribbon of water snakes along the floor, black in the wand light he stole from Ron's bedside table, and every drip becomes a metronome for his pulse. The stone here is not the warm, familiar fortress of the castle above. It is colder, veined with mineral scars, carved by hands that did not answer to Dumbledore's authority. Emotionally, he is split along a clean fault line. One half is terror, raw, animal, aware that no one knows where he is, that there is no teacher, no Bellatrix, no alpine estate, no safety net. The other half is exhilaration, the same bright rush he feels when a broom tilts into a dive, when the world narrows to speed and instinct and risk. He knows he should turn back. They are wrong who imagine Harry Potter as naturally obedient. The need to know what answered him has more pull than any rule. The layout of the chamber's approach, seen through 11-year-old eyes, is a catalogue of escalating warnings. First, the tunnel widens and the floor becomes uneven, littered with small bones and the collapsed skeletons of rats. Then, something larger. Then he sees it, a shed snakeskin, longer than the Gryffindor common room, pale and translucent, clinging to the wall like the ghost of a disaster. The air grows heavier, saturated with a predatory presence that has never seen sunlight. Serpents are carved into the pillars that begin to march along the sides of the passage, their stone eyes following him, their mouths open in frozen hisses that feel like a chorus of silent Parseltongue. He is inside someone else's secret. Not a Gryffindor prank tunnel, not a staff passage, but Slytherin's private thesis about power, made architecture. The Slytherin timeline announces itself here, in cold stone and deliberate menace. This is not Dumbledore's school. This is Salazar's argument that the worthy will go where the unworthy fear to tread. The threshold arrives as inevitability rather than surprise. The passage terminates in colossal stone doors, 2 slabs engraved with entwined serpents, whose bodies knot and loop in a pattern that feels, to Harry, uncomfortably like soul resonance rendered in granite. He does not plan to speak. The word simply rises, a hiss, shaped by an older instinct than English. Open. Parseltongue leaves his mouth like exhaled magic. The serpents stir, grinding along their grooves, stone becoming animate in obedience to a boy who has never studied this spell. The ease of it unsettles him more than the darkness beyond. The castle's oldest warding answers him with methodical certainty, as if recognizing a master rather than indulging a child. The doors part. Cold air rolls out, vast and damp, carrying the weight of a space too large to be entirely grasped by his wand light. Pillars vanish into shadow, the ceiling lost in blackness, and somewhere far within that dark, something enormous shifts. Scale on stone, a slow, deliberate rearranging. Harry freezes at the precise moment his world tilts. He is not alone. On that realization, we pause, because the next movement in this war is not a spell, but a bond. What exactly is about to look back at him, and what will it see? Eye of the Serpent, negotiating with the Basilisk at 11. What looks back at him is not a face. It is motion, an avalanche of scaled muscle, a slow tidal unfurling from the black. Canon insists that an 11-year-old Harry, dropped into this cavern, would die before he could even scream. They are wrong. In this timeline, survival is not heroism. It is reflex. The first rush of displacement air hits him before the basilisk fully emerges. Harry does not think. His body flinches. His head snaps down, eyes cutting to the wet stone at his feet, to the smear of his own reflection in the slick surface of the tunnel floor. He sees only fragments, a glistening curve of emerald, the suggestion of a jaw, the shadow of something impossibly vast sliding between the carved pillars. The glasses on his nose catch and fracture the dim light. The reflections shatter the line of sight into harmless, distorted angles. Death glides past him and fails to connect. What does connect is the voice. It rasps across the chamber, low and resonant, a sound that should be mere hissing in the human ear. Instead, to Harry, it arrives as language, coherent, intimate, like breath against the inside of his skull. The realization lands with surgical clarity. He is not hearing a monster in the walls, he is understanding it. This is not madness, this is communication. Who dares, the basilisk whispers, to wake me? The serpent's head swings, not striking, but tasting the air, tongue flickering with methodical certainty. Bound by Slytherin's command structure, it is not a mindless weapon. It is a soldier waiting for orders, and the child before it does not fit any category. Small, unmarked. Yet the master's tongue coils from his mouth when Harry, shaking, answers without meaning to. Don't kill me. The words leave him in Parseltongue, liquid and sibilant, a plea shaped as a command. The effect is immediate. The basilisk halts, muscles locking in a single, coiled line. Authority has been invoked, however clumsily. In the Slytherin timeline of this chamber, that nuance is everything. Stay back, Harry adds, voice cracking, but the grammar of snakes cares nothing for fear. It hears only imperative. Stay back. Silence settles, heavy as the air, in an alpine cave. The basilisk lowers its head, not obedient yet, but curious. You speak, it murmurs. You bear no mark. You are not the heir. What are you? Gryffindor instinct should send him scrambling for the pipe, clawing his way back to the surface fortress of stone corridors and prefect patrols. Instead, courage and Parseltongue intersect into something new. Interrogation. Harry's knees are shaking, his gaze fixed on the blurred outline of a single scale near his feet. But he does not run. What are you? He echoes. Why are you here? The basilisk answers in fragments, because that is all its orders allow. It speaks of the chamber as a weapon sleeping beneath the school, of Salazar's promise that an heir would one day command a cleansing, of centuries of waiting in the dark for a voice that never came. It names heir as rank, master as function, and itself as blade. In that exchange, a soul resonance flickers. Monster and boy, each realizing the other is a masterpiece to be molded by someone else's design. Harry feels it first as temptation. With a word, this buried war asset might move. Not now. He has no script, no ideology, only terror. But the possibility etches itself into him like a splinter. The basilisk, ancient and tactically lethal, feels it too. You could command, it observes, almost contemplative. One day. That is the moment Harry breaks. He stumbles back, hissing, "Sleep, don't come out, don't hunt," throwing every negation he can find into the language. The serpent recoils into the statue's mouth, not dismissed, merely recessed, like a weapon being polished in the dark. He flees up the pipe, hands burning on the stone, lungs tearing, but the ascent does not erase what he has learned. Above, Hogwarts remains noisy, bright, oblivious. Below, he has discovered a buried command line to an older war. And as he emerges into the dripping tiles of Myrtle's bathroom, one truth has already begun to rewire him. The chamber is not a legend. It is leverage. Secrets versus stone. How the chamber warps first-year priorities. The chamber rewires the year's hierarchy of fear. In canon, Harry climbs a neat mystery ladder, moving staircases, forbidden corridors, a three-headed dog, and only then the Philosopher's Stone. In this timeline, he falls straight down the ladder's center into Slytherin's buried vault, and everything else looks like set dressing. Once you have stood beneath a cathedral of bones and heard a basilisk breathe in the dark, a troll in a girl's bathroom is an inconvenience, not an apocalypse. The shift shows first in his routines. Nights that once would have been spent mapping secret passages with Fred and George become solitary circuits of damp corridors. Harry walking slower whenever the pipes rattle overhead, head tilted, hunting for the faintest hiss. The invisibility cloak is not a toy, it is field equipment. He uses it to return to Myrtle's bathroom, to press his ear to porcelain and stone, to whisper experimental phrases in Parseltongue and measure what answers. The castle's history lessons, once a blur of names and dates, become potential threat briefings. In Binns's class, when Hogwarts' founding is mentioned, Harry goes quiet in a new, unnerving way. He is not bored, he is listening for omissions. When McGonagall references the safest place in the wizarding world, his eyes flick down, towards the pipes, towards the buried command line he has already accessed. The stone, when Hagrid lets the name slip, registers as an intriguing puzzle. Yes, but a secondary one. The real weapon is already awake below his feet. Ron feels this reordering like a physical chill. Raised on hand-me-down tales of the Chamber of Secrets, he has always filed it under the category of family horror stories. Exaggerated, distant, safely legendary. They are wrong. When Harry, voice low and oddly flat, describes a mouth opening in the tiles and a voice that answered him, Ron's freckles seem to drain of colour. His first instinct is not curiosity but recoil. His best friend has walked into the Weasley bedtime story and come back changed. Hermione, by contrast, treats the revelation as an intellectual affront. The library is supposed to be a fortress against ignorance. If the chamber exists and the books do not say so, then the books are incomplete, and that is intolerable. She drags the boys through founders' biographies, plumbing records, even obscure monographs on castle architecture. Her obsession arrives a full year early, and in hunting Slytherin's monster, she neglects to build the elegant flowchart of protections around the stone that, in canon, she solves, almost reflexively. The trio's collective attention tilts downward into the pipes, and the stone's corridor becomes a side quest. The adults notice in fragments. In potions, Harry asks, with studied casualness, whether serpents are easier to influence magically than other creatures. Snape's eyes narrow, the room's temperature seems to drop, and for the first time he studies the boy not as James Potter's echo, but as an unknown variable with access to a very old script. In Transfiguration, a stray question about self-defending architecture makes McGonagall go very still. The chalk pauses mid-stroke. Dumbledore, watching from the edges of these reports, feels a familiar soul resonance stir. The castle is reacting, the past pressing against the present with methodical certainty. Quirrell, in that context, is diminished. The stuttering defense professor is still dangerous, still a parasite carrying Voldemort like a concealed blade. But in Harry's recalibrated threat map, he is one more nervous adult, pacing above a slumbering arsenal Harry has personally met. The stone's guardian is flesh and blood. The chamber's guardian is myth-made muscle. One can be thwarted. The other, if ever fully unleashed, would be tactically lethal. By the time Harry connects the forbidden third-floor corridor to the stone, his priorities are already inverted. He is no longer a boy chasing adventure. He is a witness managing triage between two secrets, weighing which catastrophe the world can afford to wake first. Dumbledore's quiet panic, an 11-year-old parcel mouth. The decision crystallizes in a bathroom that smells of mildew and old fear. Harry stands beneath the cracked mirrors of Myrtle's haunt, heart hammering, having just fled the third-floor corridor and the sleeping Cerberus, with one conviction: the stone is dangerous, but the voice in the pipes is worse. When the basilisk's movement shudders through the plumbing a second time, stone groaning, water trembling in the bowls, his nerve breaks. He hisses, without thinking, for it to stop. The taps twist, porcelain grinds aside. A vertical shaft yawns open where a sink used to be. He stares into the dark and understands, with the blunt clarity of the abused and neglected, that this is older than Quirrell, older than the war, older than him. He does not climb down. He runs to the only adult he half trusts. Minerva McGonagall listens to his halting confession in her office. The words, "I can talk to snakes," landing with the same weight as I opened a door that shouldn't exist. Her face does not soften, it sharpens. Within minutes, the castle's fragile calm is peeled back, and the staff are pulled into an emergency council, portraits whispering like disturbed crows as owls are barred from the windows. Hogwarts becomes, in miniature, a fortress under silent siege. Dumbledore, at the head of the table, does not look surprised. In this timeline, the old man has already read too much resonance in the boy's scar, in his survival, in the way Harry's gaze tracks shadows as if expecting them to strike. Parseltongue plus access to Slytherin's chamber is not a revelation. It is confirmation. Soul resonance. The echo of Voldemort's mind nested inside an 11-year-old who has just demonstrated that the castle will move when he speaks. They are wrong, he notes, silently. Those in the wider world who still imagine Harry as a passive symbol. What sits in Gryffindor Tower is a weapon being polished in the dark by circumstances alone. A masterpiece to be moulded either by him or by something far less scrupulous. Snape's reaction fractures along older fault lines. On one level, there is professional horror, a basilisk in the foundations, its venom capable of ending wars in a single glare, its presence turning every pipe into a loaded wand. On another, there is academic fascination with the chamber's layered wards, Slytherin's magic braided through the stone with methodical certainty. But beneath both lies a quieter bitterness, Lily's son bearing a Slytherin-coded power that will mark him as other, dangerous, unclean. The world will not see nuance. It will see a boy who speaks the Dark Lord's tongue. The question of institutional response is brutally simple. Do they seal the chamber and obliviate the child, amputating knowledge before it metastasizes, or keep him close and study the bond? McGonagall, jaw clenched, argues for protection through ignorance. Snape, eyes narrowed, argues for containment through understanding. Dumbledore chooses the third path that frightens them both: informed surveillance. He must. An amnesiac key is still a key. A conscious one can, perhaps, be taught when never to turn. So the chamber becomes classified, reduced on parchment to a single red ink notation in the headmaster's files, and a vow of silence among a handful of adults and one shell-shocked first year. The wider school hears nothing. No rumours of serpents in the pipes, no whispers of a Gryffindor parcel mouth. The Slytherin timeline is born not with fanfare, but with bureaucratic omission. Yet asymmetry of knowledge is inherently unstable. Secrets this large generate their own pressure. And as Dumbledore dismisses the meeting, already recalculating every future move around an 11-year-old gatekeeper, one question hangs in the stale air like prophecy. Who will discover the truth first? The Dark Lord hunting his lost fragment, or the boy beginning to suspect that the monster under the school is not the only one that answers when he speaks? Weapon or child? Harry's new identity under the castle. In the weeks after the chamber's discovery, Harry's world does not expand, it bifurcates. Above ground, he is the uncertain first year with ink on his fingers and Quidditch on his timetable. Below, he is the boy who can speak a single syllable and make stone obey, pipes open, and an ancient weapon uncoil in the dark. The contradiction begins to eat at him. Harry is revolted by the basilisk's presence, the reek of old blood in the airless vault, the shed skin like a collapsed cathedral. But beneath the nausea, there is a pulse of exhilaration he cannot entirely deny. For the first time in any timeline, when something enormous moves toward him, it is not to hurt him. It is to listen. The Dursleys' cupboard has been replaced by a subterranean hall where his voice is command, not apology, a hidden throne room of stone and serpents where he is no longer prey. Adults move quickly to define this new identity before Harry can. Dumbledore calls him to the office with its whirring instruments and phoenix song and speaks, very gently, of responsibility. Power, he says, is not evil, but its use carves the soul. The basilisk must never be ordered to harm. The chamber is to be sealed, except under his direct supervision. Harry hears the words, but what lodges is the framing. This is not a gift. It is a burden, a liability to be managed. McGonagall is sharper. In her version of the story, there are rules, and Harry is already far too close to the line. She talks of safety protocols, of restricted areas, of how easily one misjudgment could start a war between houses, or even with the ministry. Her eyes, usually flinty with academic authority, hold something like fear, not of the basilisk, of what an 11-year-old might do with it. Snape is different. In the dim light of his office, he does not moralize, he predicts. Parseltongue, he informs Harry with methodical certainty, is a language the world associates with one man. You will find, he says, that people prefer their heroes untainted. When they learn you speak with snakes, they will decide what you are. They are wrong, the narration insists. But Harry is 11 and he half believes them anyway. House dynamics begin to warp around that belief. A few Ravenclaws, detained near Myrtle's bathroom during the lockdown, whisper that Potter was seen stepping out past the prefect cordon, escorted by professors like a dangerous artifact. Gryffindor celebrates the headline version. Harry helped the staff find a legendary chamber, yet the dormitory resonance shifts. Ron laughs it off, but Seamus and Dean trade glances when pipes hiss. Their golden boy has been somewhere they cannot imagine and will not describe. Slytherin, meanwhile, treats him as a riddle carved into the castle itself. Some eye him with proprietary interest, others with insulted suspicion that a Gryffindor has trespassed on their founder's legacy, but all recalibrate. In the Slytherin timeline of corridor gossip, Harry is either a missorted heir or a weapon being polished in the dark by Dumbledore. Canon tells us Harry first hears the word Parseltongue in second year and spirals, briefly, into the fear that he might be the heir of Slytherin. In this timeline, that question arrives a full year earlier, with less context, less language, and less trust. The sole resonance he feels in the chamber, snake to boy, boy to stone, becomes a private indictment. If he can command what Slytherin left behind, what does that make him? The answer does not come in words. It comes in silence. Night after night, Harry lies in his four-poster bed, curtains drawn, not listening for Peeves or the creak of the tower, but for the faintest hiss in the pipes. A scale against metal, a breath that is not human. Somewhere beneath the school, a colossal head rests upon its coils, awake in the dark, waiting, not for Salazar, not for Riddle, but for the child whose voice opened the door. And Harry, eyes open to the canopy, cannot decide which terrifies him more, that the basilisk might call again, or that, when it does, he will answer. The stone that didn't matter, Quirrell's plot in the shadow of the chamber. The Philosopher's Stone was meant to be Harry's first great trial. In this timeline, it becomes background noise to a serpent in the walls. From November onward, his year fractures along two forbidden axes. On the third floor, a trapdoor hidden beneath Fluffy's massive paws. In the second floor bathroom, a sink that moves when he hisses without meaning to. The trio still stumble upon Hagrid's little project, still watch the three-headed dog drool over the sealed entrance, but their fear is no longer singular. The forbidden corridor promises theft. The forbidden bathroom promises revelation. Canon insists that childish curiosity drives them toward the stone. They are wrong. Here, curiosity is rationed, parcelled out between Quirrell's stutter and the basilisk's voice, between Nicholas Flamel's name and the memory of stone grinding aside at a single word. Every night, Harry lies in his four-poster, listening not for creaking armour, but for the faint, lethal slide of scales far below. When Hagrid, over tea and rock cakes, lets Fluffy slip, just play him a bit of music, Hermione's reaction is less conspiratorial thrill and more exhausted calculation. The pattern interrupt lands hard. She snaps that this is beyond them, that between a legendary killing serpent and a dark wizard after an immortal alchemist, the only rational move is escalation. In this Slytherin timeline, her pragmatism surfaces early. She drags Harry and Ron to McGonagall. By evening, Dumbledore is fully briefed. Dumbledore in crisis mode is not the twinkling chess master of legend, but a headmaster who has just confirmed that an 11-year-old can open Salazar's private war bunker. Security tightens with methodical certainty. The third-floor corridor is sealed with additional wards. Patrols double, passwords change nightly. The children are firmly, almost brutally, removed from the board. Harry is questioned, gently, relentlessly, about every word he spoke in Parseltongue, every flicker of soul resonance he felt in the chamber's oppressive dark. Quirrell feels the shift before he understands it. Wards thicken like ice around the stone. Staff move with clipped urgency. Dumbledore's absences vanish. Something ancient has woken beneath the school, and the castle itself hums with a low, predatory attention. Voldemort, riding the back of a mediocre academic, recognizes a rival predator. Quirrell makes one attempt to trace the whispers in the pipes, prodding at Myrtle's bathroom, muttering unlocking charms at porcelain and rust. Nothing yields. Without Parseltongue, the chamber remains a locked fortress, its weapon inaccessible. Two futures branch cleanly from this pressure. In the first, Dumbledore's vigilance holds. Quirrell never reaches the Mirror of Erised. Every diversion is anticipated, every corridor watched. Forced to abandon the stone, Voldemort peels away from Quirrell's ruined body in the Forbidden Forest, not merely defeated, but humiliated by an enemy he never saw. A basilisk denied him, a boy he cannot yet control, a masterpiece to be moulded slipping out of reach. In the second, Desperation radicalizes him. If he cannot command the chamber, he can attempt to command its master. Quirrell intercepts Harry alone, not with a troll or a cursed broom, but with whispered promises about heritage and power, framing Parseltongue as authority over monsters. The stone becomes only one prize among several, immortality in his grasp, a living conduit to Salazar's legacy before him, a weapon being polished in the dark. Either way, the macro shift is absolute. The stone is no longer the defining crucible of Harry's childhood. The chamber has stolen that role, bending his fears and loyalties around the deep wet silence beneath Hogwarts. Voldemort's first-year gambit is delayed, distorted, or made tactically lethal by this early failure, and the war that follows will not be fought on the terms canon prepared anyone to expect. Year-by-year shockwaves, a new second year without a mystery. Second year does not begin with a whisper in the walls. It begins with paperwork, wards, and the institutional memory of terror. In this timeline, the chamber is no longer a ghost story traded over pumpkin juice. It is a documented security incident. Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Snape have spent the summer turning a myth into a managed threat, layering the girls' bathroom with quiet, vicious protections and sealing the stone serpent door with enchantments only the headmaster and one very unsettled 11-year-old have ever tested. The legend has already been dragged into the light. The monster has already been seen. Hogwarts feels less like a school and more like a fortress, politely pretending otherwise. That is the world Tom Riddle's diary walks into. Lucius Malfoy still slips the small black book into Ginny Weasley's cauldron, still imagining a neat political assassination, unleash Slytherin's monster, discredit Arthur Weasley, and embarrass Dumbledore in one elegant stroke. They are wrong. The staff he underestimates now operate with methodical certainty that any Slytherin-related disturbance is not coincidence, but escalation. A single mention of hissing in the plumbing, a cat frozen mid-arch near a puddle of water, and the faculty do not debate whether the chamber exists. They convene crisis protocol around a known, sealed basilisk. The diary's margin for subtlety narrows to a razor. When Harry first encounters the book, the pivot is immediate and quiet. In canon, Tom Marvolo Riddle is an empty name, a polite prefect in sepia tones. Here, it carries weight. Dumbledore's guarded explanations after first year, half history, half interrogation, have already etched that name into Harry's mind as the boy who opened the chamber before him, the shadow whose sole resonance still clings to the wet stone far below. A blank diary bearing that identity is not charming. It is forensic evidence that has somehow learned to write back. So when the ink absorbs his words and answers, Harry does not relax into the illusion of a sympathetic confidant. He tests it, prods at its gaps, lies on purpose. The diary's attempt to lure him into the memory of 1943 becomes less seduction and more cross-examination. A weapon being polished in the dark, meeting a child who has already stood in front of the original Serpent and survived. Trust never quite forms. Suspicion does. The wider school, however, turns its suspicion elsewhere. In the Slytherin timeline of this second year, the paranoia is inverted. Students no longer fear an unseen heir and an unproven monster. They fear a known basilisk and the boy who once spoke to it and lived. Every scrape in the pipes, every rumour of petrified ghosts or skittering spiders snaps the collective gaze back to Harry, not just to Slytherin House. To him, personally, as if the chamber were an extension of his will rather than Salazar's. The horror, therefore, is not in the discovery that the chamber exists. It is in the realization that despite wards, despite adult vigilance, despite Harry's earlier descent into the dark, something or someone has reached through their precautions and turned that buried corridor back on. The war for Hogwarts' future is no longer about proving a legend. It is about identifying which unseen hand is now using an already open wound as a tactically lethal conduit. And the next time the walls hiss, no one can pretend it is an accident. The question becomes brutal and simple. If the chamber is sealed, what else has been compromised? Riddles, countermove, diary, basilisk, and a different dual underground. The compromise arrives in a deceptively small form. A battered black diary lying in a second-year girl's cauldron. The staff think the chamber has been warded, catalogued, rendered inert. They are wrong. The wound is not closed. It has been given a quill. In this timeline, the diary does not have to sell Harry a legend of pipes and bones. He has already walked the slick stone, already felt the air grow wet and cold around a sleeping power. Riddle, ink-bound and patient, reads that memory the moment Harry's quill hesitates over the first page. The sole resonance between boy and basilisk is a bright, exploitable fault line. Where Canon Tom flatters Harry as a celebrity, this Tom flatters him as a colleague in monstrosity, the only one alive who has stood before Slytherin's beast and walked away. The seduction is therefore not, "I can show you what you missed," but "I am the only one who understands what you saw." Riddle writes about the texture of the chamber's silence, the way old magic hums in the stone, the weight of commanding a creature designed as a weapon being polished in the dark. He names the guilt Harry never voiced, that by speaking, by commanding, he has already participated in Slytherin's project. The diary becomes less a confidant and more a mirror that insists his darkest instinct is simply clarity. Accordingly, the descent is reframed. Ginny still fades, still slips like ink between the lines of her own life, but her collapse is not the sole bait. Riddle offers history. He sketches scenes of Salazar drafting the first blood laws, of the basilisk coiled beneath the foundations as a living failsafe, of headmasters who knew and chose not to act. Every entry is an indictment of Dumbledore's omissions. When the writing finally bleeds into a command, "Come down," I will tell you what he never will. Harry's choice is not framed as rescue alone. It is an act of intellectual defiance. Underground, the confrontation fractures along lines no one in the world above has modelled. The basilisk wakes to two masters, the echo of the boy who first spoke to it, and the shade of the teenager who once ordered it to kill. Parseltongue fills the chamber like crossing blades. Riddle's commands are sharp, imperial, backed by the authority of origin. Harry's are newer, but anchored in the recent, visceral memory of having stayed its fangs. For a heartbeat, the monster simply shudders between them, its head tracking the stronger pull. Here, alternate outcomes are not theoretical, They are mechanically plausible. Harry can, by sheer will and timing, force the basilisk to turn, to strike at the figure of Riddle, rather than the red-haired body on the floor. The serpent's fang tears diary flesh, ink sprays like arterial blood, and the shade screams as if each drop is a year of stolen life. Or Harry can choose a darker mercy, ordering the basilisk to blind itself, to grind its own eyes against the stone until the chamber is filled with the wet scrape of ruined weaponry. Victory, in that variant, tastes like ash and bile. Either way, the myth pivots. Harry does not simply kill a monster and drag a girl to safety. He redefines the terms of Slytherin's legacy by commanding, maiming, or binding its ultimate instrument. In the Slytherin timeline of Hogwarts' whispered histories, he becomes the boy who broke the basilisk, not by a lucky sword, but by standing at the hinge point between obedience and annihilation, and choosing. Above, the castle feels the magic lurch and resettle, as if a dormant fortress has turned on a new axis. What no one yet knows is whether the power that just shifted now belongs to the school or to the boy who walked out of the dark. From basilisk to war, how early knowledge rewrites books 3 and 4. From that moment, the axis of Harry's life tilts permanently away from the safe, red and gold myth Dumbledore prefers. The boy who walked out of the dark beneath Hogwarts carries a knowledge no first year should possess. The headmaster knew there was a basilisk under his school and did not dismantle the fortress to root it out. In this timeline, that knowledge does not fade with summer, it ferments. Every omission in Prisoner of Azkaban acquires a sharper edge. When Dumbledore speaks vaguely about what he cannot yet explain, Harry hears, with brutal clarity, what I am choosing not to tell the child who can open Slytherin's hellmouth. The time turner given to Hermione, the secrecy around the Dementors, even the evasive answers about his parents' betrayals, each becomes another layer in a pattern of managed ignorance. Authority, Harry learns, is less about wisdom than about information control. So when Sirius Black escapes Azkaban, Harry does not fixate on the boogeyman in the newspapers. He has already stood in a chamber lined with snake skulls and fossilized fear. A mass murderer godfather is not the most monstrous revelation his world can offer. What obsesses him is the architecture of lies around Sirius's name. Why did no one ever tell him his parents had a secret keeper? Why did no one explain the legal mechanism that sent a supposed traitor to Azkaban without trial? They are wrong, he realizes. Those adults who insist he is too young to bear the full story, because he has already borne the basilisk's gaze and survived. The Shrieking Shack confrontation thus changes texture. Harry's wand does not waver simply because he sees a broken man. It wavers because the narrative finally fractures. Lupin, Dumbledore, the Ministry, everyone has curated his history. Sirius is less a lost parent figure and more Exhibit A in a systemic pattern. The adults who decide which horrors are appropriate for the boy who commands horrors of his own. By Goblet of Fire, that pattern has calcified into methodical certainty. When his name erupts from the goblet, Harry's first instinct is not disbelief, but recognition. This is the same logic that once imagined him as a potential master of the basilisk. A child as conduit, a child as leverage. The tournament becomes, in his mind, another ritual spaceless, spectacle, than controlled crucible. He stops reacting and starts calculating, mapping allies, loopholes, and exit routes with a tactically lethal calm that unnerves even Moody. Here, Dumbledore finally concedes a deeper layer. The magic that bound the basilisk to Slytherin's heir hums on the same frequency as the curse that marked Harry as Voldemort's equal. Call it soul resonance, an echo between founder magic and prophecy. The chamber was not an anomaly. It was rehearsal, a subterranean prototype for the war to come, which is why, in the Little Hangleton graveyard, the scene no longer plays as Harry's first encounter with resurrected serpentine power. He has already stood opposite an ancient serpent and forced it to yield. Voldemort's return is escalation, not initiation. A darker, mobile basilisk with a wand and an army. The boy who once spoke a single word to open the earth and wake death now faces the wizard who would do the same to the world. The war that begins there is not between innocence and evil. It is between two beings who understand with terrible clarity what waits beneath the stone. The politics of fear, ministry, Parseltongue, and a living weapon. The wizarding world convinces itself that what happens beneath Hogwarts can be contained by stone, by secrecy, by the headmaster's reassuring silence. They are wrong. In a surveillance culture built on gossip and owls, the revelation that an 11-year-old once walked into legend and spoke to the basilisk was never going to stay buried. The leak does not arrive as a grand confession, it seeps. In this timeline, the diary incident in second year leaves a paper trail. Madame Pomfrey's notes on basilisk venom, McGonagall's terse report on prior access to the chamber, and, above all, the terrified recollections of a half-dozen students who saw Harry hiss at a sink and vanish into the earth. By the time Rita Skeeter hears the word Parseltongue in a Hogwarts corridor, the narrative is already a masterpiece to be moulded. The prophet runs with it. Boy who lived, or heir of Slytherin, becomes less a question than an accusation printed in black ink. The Ministry responds with the only tool it truly trusts: fear. Fudge, already wobbling under the weight of Voldemort's shadow, now faces a second, younger anomaly, one who has not merely survived dark power, but interfaced with it, commanded it, and walked away. In private briefings, Aurors are told that Potter has entered the chamber twice, that he alone can open a structure Salazar Slytherin designed as a fortress against the unworthy. The boy is quietly reclassified in internal memos. Not just symbol, but asset. A potential weapon being polished in the dark by circumstances no one fully understands. By the time Scrimgeour takes office, this hardens into doctrine. He approaches Harry not as a child, but as a tactically lethal variable whose sole resonance with serpents and buried monsters could, in theory, be pointed like a wand. What if the basilisk is not dead? What if there are other chambers, other fail-safes in the castle's foundations? The questions are paranoid, but in a world at war, paranoia feels like methodical certainty. Socially, the fallout is slower, but more poisonous. Parents write to Hogwarts in droves, demanding to know why a boy who can open Slytherin's murder vault is allowed to roam the corridors. Some pull their children entirely, preferring the fragile safety of home to a school where the heir's tongue might, at any moment, wake something under their feet. Within Slytherin, The reaction fractures along old bloodlines. The purists whisper that the true legacy has been contaminated by Gryffindor sentimentality, that the Chamber's master has betrayed his mandate. In Gryffindor Tower, the echo of second-year suspicion returns, but magnified. The boy who shares their common room is also the boy who speaks a predator's language. Umbridge arrives into this climate not merely as an educational reformer, but as a warden. In her brief from the minister, controlling Harry Potter now explicitly includes neutralizing his dark talents. She orders experimental wards layered over Myrtle's bathroom. She questions Flitwick and Snape about sealing Parseltongue triggers. She calls Harry into her lace-draped office and, with syrupy malice, suggests that for his own safety, he might be better housed under ministry supervision, where responsible adults can ensure he never again misuses his access to ancient weapons. The quill that writes in his blood is only the visible part of a larger project, to domesticate the chamber by chaining its only living key. And beneath all of this runs a chilling inversion. The child once hailed as the guarantor of salvation is, in some quarters, quietly recast as a second Slytherin, a living echo of the founder's will. The fear is not that Harry will fail to save them from darkness. It is that one day he will open the earth not to rescue the school, but to judge it. Horcruxes in the deep. How the chamber alters the final war. The world will later say that Harry only learns what a Horcrux is in 6th year, when Dumbledore finally peels back the curtain. They are wrong. The education began the moment an 11-year-old boy stood in Slytherin's cathedral of stone and watched a basilisk coil to his whispered will. In this timeline, the diary and the Serpent are not separate crises, neatly filed into different school years. They are chapters of the same curriculum. By the time the diary emerges in 2nd year, Harry has already confronted a magically bound monster whose obedience rides on a single language, and he has already felt the echoing pull of another will layered over the chamber's ancient commands. When he drives the basilisk fang through Riddle's diary, he is not blindly stabbing a cursed notebook. He is reenacting in miniature the destruction of a soul anchor he has already felt, humming beneath the school. The Horcrux hunt, when it finally comes, is not revelation. It is recognition, soul resonance. That recognition pushes him back underground. Older, less easily manipulated by adult assurances, he returns to the chamber with deliberate, almost archaeological intent. The descent is no longer a panicked rescue. It is an expedition into the ideological bedrock of Hogwarts. Carvings along the pillars that once blurred into menace now resolve into method. Serpentine scripts describing the binding of will to place, invocations that speak of a Lord of the Below whose consciousness endures as long as the lair remembers his name. In one niche, perhaps, a cracked stone basin still hums faintly with preserved Parseltongue, a prototype for anchoring memory that foreshadows the diary's more portable obscenity. Slytherin's genius is suddenly legible as a precursor to Voldemort's, not an aberration, but a lineage. Dumbledore cannot ignore this. Knowing that Harry is the only living key to Slytherin's fortress, he quietly reorients his strategy. The chamber becomes both training ground and moral crucible. He sends Harry down to retrieve a specific relic, an inscribed circlet, a scale, a shard of basilisk fang still saturated with ancient magic, claiming it is necessary for research, while watching what the boy chooses to do with the power at his command. Does he dismiss the basilisk's lingering presence as a weapon being polished in the dark, or does he attempt to command that remnant, to turn Slytherin's masterpiece to his own purposes? The question is not academic. It is a controlled experiment in what kind of authority Harry intends to wield in war. Years later, when that war finally breaches Hogwarts, the Battle of Hogwarts does not remain politely on the lawns and in the Great Hall. The school is a vertical battlefield. Harry's intimate map of the Undercroft turns the chamber into a hidden artery of resistance. He ghosts allies through the tunnels, slipping Order members behind Death Eater lines. He uses the sink entrance as a kill box, its narrow descent perfect for ambushes. He even lures Nagini into the depths, engineering a serpentine confrontation where mirrors and stone give him every advantage against a tactically lethal familiar. The symbolic inversion is brutal. What began as a shrine to blood purity becomes the staging ground for dismantling Voldemort's soul work. Each Horcrux Harry destroys is measured against that first basilisk, that first diary, that first decision to stab rather than seize. In the Slytherin timeline of Hogwarts' hidden history, the chamber ceases to be merely a racist myth. It becomes the blueprint for unmaking the Dark Lord from the inside, a buried manual that only Harry can read. Yet even as he uses it to end one tyrant, the question lingers in the dripping silence beneath the castle. What happens when the last Horcrux falls, and the boy who mastered the chamber realizes that Slytherin's throne is still empty? Character alchemy. Ron, Hermione, Draco, and a different Harry. The chamber does not just alter the war, it rewires the friendships that were supposed to anchor Harry against it. In this timeline, the emotional core of the trio is dragged underground into a stone cathedral built for fear, secrecy, and serpents. Every relationship he has will now have to pass through that door of scales and skulls. Begin with Ron. Canon insists his role is comic relief. Loyal sidekick, the boy who follows. They are wrong. Here, Ron's childhood nightmares, the forbidden forest, scuttling legs, his brother's whispered tales of a monster under the school, suddenly have coordinates. His best friend has walked into the myth and come back with knowledge no Weasley ever held. Awe hits first. Harry as Dragon Slayer, Basilisk Whisperer, the mate who literally went into the dark. Envy follows, quieter but more corrosive, especially when teachers defer to Harry's experience with the chamber. Then terror arrives, not of the basilisk, but of what Harry can make obey. The pattern emerges. In first year's aftermath, Ron flinches when pipes groan. He jokes too loudly when Harry mentions hissing in his sleep. He will still throw himself between Harry and danger, but there is a new hesitation, a half-second where he remembers Green Eyes meeting a Serpent's and winning. Their friendship survives, but the power imbalance is no longer theoretical. It has a lair. Hermione, by contrast, does not flinch. She annotates. The chamber, for her, becomes an exam question written in blood. How did Salazar bind a monster to a bloodline, and what legal architecture allowed it? While others debate whether Harry is safe, she is in the library hunting founder-era charters, magical contracts, and obscure Parseltongue references. that even Dumbledore has only skimmed. In this timeline, she is not merely the conscience telling Harry what is right. She is the co-strategist calculating what is possible. We see it when the diary appears. Hermione treats it not as a cursed curiosity, but as a data point in a larger Slytherin system. Chamber, basilisk, heir, contract. Her research into soul resonance, binding oaths, and the ethics of killing a sentient beast gives Harry a language for his instincts. Together, they begin to treat Hogwarts itself as an archive of leverage, a fortress whose foundations can be read and rewritten. Draco's trajectory warps in the opposite direction. Raised on tales of Slytherin's glory, he has been promised, implicitly, that the chamber is his inheritance, the buried coronation hall of his house. Learning that an 11-year-old half-blood Gryffindor has opened it first is not just an insult, it is a theft of destiny. Draco's resentment becomes tactically lethal. Every glance across the Great Hall now carries an unspoken accusation. You are sitting on my throne. Yet, that fury can bend two ways. Either he hardens into a more dangerous rival, doubling down on blood ideology to reclaim what Harry contaminated, or, much later, he sees the same blueprint Hermione does and decides that Slytherin's legacy must be reclaimed from Voldemort, not from Harry. An alliance of necessity becomes imaginable. Two boys using the same serpent-carved hall to unmake the master who weaponized it. At the center of all of this is a different Harry. His scar and orphanhood no longer stand alone as his defining wounds. He now carries a secret corridor into the castle's subconscious. The chamber becomes a private axis of power that no one else can fully share, not even those he loves most. Every descent reinforces the same lesson. When the world panics, Harry goes down alone. That is the new central tension of the Slytherin timeline. Can a boy whose greatest victories happen in solitary, subterranean silence remain the friend who chooses loyalty over power when the world keeps handing him deeper keys, first to a basilisk, then to prophecy, and finally to command over life and death itself? Myth of the Second Slytherin, Harry's legend in this timeline. Future generations will not tell this as a simple survival story. They will not stop at the crib in Godric's Hollow or the green flash over a ruined cottage. In this timeline, the legend begins in a flooded bathroom where the pipes whisper back. The children of that later Hogwarts will trade versions of it in the common rooms, not just the boy who lived, but the first year who walked alone into Slytherin's chamber and came back with the serpent's tongue coiled behind his teeth. The myth condenses to a single image: an undersized Gryffindor, robes damp with sewer water, standing before a sleeping basilisk and speaking a language that should have killed him. The boy who lived becomes, simultaneously, the boy who listened. Canon gives us a different archetype: Harry as reluctant hero, dragged step by step into prophecy, forever reacting to crises engineered by adults and by Voldemort. That Harry is defined by refusal. He resists the pedestal, resists the hallows, resists the idea that he is anything but ordinary. Here, by contrast, the Slytherin timeline frames him as a liminal figure who chooses, very early, to step into the dark and learn its grammar. Half Gryffindor, half Slytherin, he is not pulled by prophecy, so much as he is pulled by curiosity and that unnerving soul resonance when the stone sink spirals away at a single hissed word. Symbolically, the axis of the saga tilts. The basilisk fang is no longer just an improvisational tool in a later Horcrux hunt. It is the first relic of his descent, a trophy the staff quietly lock away because no one is certain whether it belongs in a museum or in a vault marked Hazard. The diary, intercepted before it can hollow out Ginny Weasley, becomes the captured ghost of a future war, a bound manuscript of what might have been. Moaning Myrtle's bathroom ceases to be a tragic footnote and hardens into a threshold myth, the place where an 11-year-old crossed from schoolboy to something the castle itself had to negotiate with. The houses, predictably, rewrite their founders around him. Gryffindor claims Harry as proof that courage can master cunning, that true bravery is not merely charging a troll, but walking willingly beneath the school, unchaperoned, to parley with a legend designed to annihilate you. Slytherin House is forced into a more painful reckoning. Their founder's greatest secret, his living weapon, ultimately answered to a half-blood outsider who broke Voldemort's claim to their lineage with methodical certainty. In whispered arguments by the fire, they insist that Harry is really one of theirs, a masterpiece to be moulded, that Dumbledore stole. They are wrong, but the resentment lingers like smoke. Above all, the myth installs a new, quiet terror in the post-war world. The central question is no longer only, what if Voldemort returns? But its colder mirror, what if the boy who commands the Serpent ever decides that the castle above is no longer worth protecting? Because once a child has learned that the true levers of power sit beneath the floorboards, in chambers, in secrets, in monsters that listen when he speaks, the fortress of Hogwarts starts to look less like a school and more like an asset, a weapon being polished in the dark. And legends, once armed, rarely stay defensive forever. The cost of opening doors, psychological scars, and moral lines. Power has a price, and in this timeline, the bill arrives early. It does not come as prophecy or scar pain, but as dreams, stone grinding apart, metal pipes shuddering, a wet hiss threading through the dark like a promise and a threat. In the months after he first opens the chamber, Harry's sleep becomes a battlefield. He wakes with the echo of Parseltongue still on his tongue, with the phantom awareness of eyes he must not meet, with the irrational conviction that the sink in the corner is watching him back. The castle's bathrooms, once merely inconvenient, acquire a quiet horror. He calculates how long he can hold it between classes, how many corridors he can cross before the sound of running water becomes the sound of scales on stone. Trauma here is not theatrical. It is methodical certainty. It is the way his hand stalls an inch above a tap because he remembers what lies beneath the plumbing. The adults misread this. They assume that because no one has died, because the basilisk has been contained and the entrance sealed, the danger has passed. They are wrong. The real chamber is now in his head, an underground fortress of images and associations he cannot quite board up. Enclosed spaces, cupboards, even the narrow beds of the hospital wing acquire a new resonance layered over the old Dursley claustrophobia until his fear becomes geological, stratified. Worse than the fear, though, is the authority. Every time he shapes Parseltongue to command the basilisk to sleep, to turn, to look away, he rehearses a grammar of control. At 11, he tells himself it is mercy. He is using the monster as little as possible. Only when Dumbledore insists on studying, on understanding, on cataloguing this weapon being polished in the dark. But the language does not care about motive. It trains him to see obedience as a function of the right word, spoken in the right tone. In the Slytherin timeline of his own mind, creatures become vectors, leverage, an extension of his will. That habit does not vanish when the chamber is finally abandoned. Years later, when he raises his wand and forces a Death Eater to drop their weapon with the Cruciatus, there is a flicker of déjà vu, the same cold clarity he felt facing yellow eyes in the green gloom. When he walks into the forest to die, it is not only because he has accepted prophecy, it is because he has learned that certain doors, once opened, demand payment in blood, and he will not outsource that cost. Hermione sees the drift first. When, in 5th year, someone suggests the chamber as a tactical asset, a hidden route, a prison, a vault for contraband, she does not argue logistics. She asks him very quietly what he is willing to command this time. Ginny, whose first year has been rewritten by his early discovery, adds a sharper edge. If he turns that corridor of bones into a war room, what part of him stays down there when he comes back up? Their resistance forces him to articulate a line. He will not use the basilisk against people. He will not treat students, even enemies, as targets in an underground shooting gallery. Some powers remain quarantined. The war ends. The world moves on. Decades later, Harry returns to Hogwarts on an ordinary afternoon and finds himself, without planning to, in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The tiles are the same. The silence is not. He stands before the familiar sink and, in a voice barely louder than breath, shapes the old sibilant word. The tap shivers. Stone remembers him. He proves in that instant that the door will always answer. And then he steps back. He does not open it. The question that lingers, as he walks away without looking over his shoulder, is simple and chilling. In the next crisis, will that restraint hold? Or has the chamber merely learned to wait where no one can see it? From canon to counterfactual, what this changes and what it doesn't. That restraint is the hinge of the entire experiment. The world will tell itself that as long as the chamber stays sealed, the timeline is fundamentally unchanged. But an unopened door is the same as a forgotten one. They are wrong, because even in this timeline, the constants hold with unnerving rigidity. Harry's fundamental decency does not evaporate just because the taps answer him. It is precisely why he steps back. His loyalty to Ron and Hermione remains the axis of his choices, the reason he keeps the secret and the reason he would break it in an instant if they were threatened. Voldemort's obsession with conquering death still hums beneath everything like a poisonous bass note. And the old argument, blood versus choice, lineage versus self-definition, retains its centrality. The boy who can speak to snakes is still, at his core, the boy who chooses not to. What changes is when and how he first looks directly into the dark. In canon, his first true confrontation is the mirror of Erised and Quirrell's burning skin in the underground chamber. Here, It is the hiss of stone in a girl's bathroom and the knowledge that a basilisk is sleeping under his feet. Publicly, he is still the Gryffindor seeker with muddy knees. Privately, he is a potential heir of Slytherin in Dumbledore's files. The headmaster's strategy adjusts with methodical certainty. The boy is no longer just a symbol, but a possible key, a weapon being polished in the dark, whether anyone intends it or not. Hogwarts itself shifts role. The castle is no longer a whimsical maze of moving staircases and secret passages discovered by accident. It becomes a layered fortress whose deepest foundations are politically charged ground. The chamber's existence, even unopened, amplifies motifs that were always there. A school built over secrets, a faculty that deals in half-truths, a curriculum that withholds as much as it reveals. Every lesson in defense against the dark arts now carries a silent counterpoint. There is a monster downstairs that makes these classroom boggarts feel like stage props. This comes with a cost. Some of the innocence of first year evaporates the moment Harry realizes the pipes are whispering in a language only he understands. The delight of the moving staircases, the wonder of Christmas at Hogwarts, even the thrill of the midnight duel are all reframed against the knowledge that the castle is sitting atop a coiled apocalypse. In exchange, his arc fuses more tightly to the castle's soul resonance. He is not just passing through a boarding school. He is entangled with its founding magic, a masterpiece to be moulded by stone and serpent. The Slytherin timeline is usually imagined as alpine estates and overt tyranny. Here, the divergence is quieter, but no less tactically lethal. One boy's curiosity in a bathroom corridor has turned Hogwarts from backdrop into active combatant in the coming war. The question that remains as we move toward closure is not which version is better, but which lens reveals more about how fragile canon really is. If you are forced to choose between the brighter school story and this more ominous, politically charged fortress, which feels more honest to the power sleeping under those floors, and how long do you truly believe that door can stay closed? Your turn in the chamber. Speculation, variance, and next what if. The door cannot stay closed. It never does in this castle that is, itself, a layered chamber built on older sins. In this timeline, the spine of the divergence is brutally simple. An 11-year-old hears a voice after the troll, follows the pipes instead of the professors, and opens a legend with a hissed word he does not yet understand. The stone becomes secondary. Quirrell becomes background noise, because Harry's true first secret is not a mirror in a locked room, but a serpent in a buried cathedral, and he walks away from that encounter with an uneasy truce and a living weapon under the floorboards. From there, the war rearranges itself with methodical certainty. Quirrell's role collapses into a failed probe rather than a defining trauma. The diary, when it finally surfaces, is forced into a confrontation with a Harry who already knows the architecture of Slytherin's legacy, and Tom Riddle finds his theatrics undercut by a boy who has seen the basilisk yawn in the dark. The Ministry, confronted early with Parseltongue, petrified stonework, and a sealed report about a monster they cannot control, becomes more suspicious, more interventionist, more afraid of Hogwarts as a fortress that might not be under their authority at all. Relationships do not escape the resonance. Ron is pulled into a friendship that now orbits around secrets he cannot hear. Hermione, exposed earlier to ancient wards and structural lies, becomes a researcher of foundations instead of merely facts. Draco, discovering that the Gryffindor nobody holds the key to his ancestral house's myth, is dragged into a rivalry that feels uncomfortably like soul resonance. By the time the final war ignites, every duel is fought in the shadow of Slytherin's lair. Every strategy haunted by the unasked question, will Harry open the door one more time? This is where you enter the chamber. If you were writing the next layer of this Slytherin timeline, what do you do with the basilisk? Does Harry keep it as a weapon being polished in the dark? A last resort deterrent he swears never to unleash, and then inevitably does. Does he bind it with contracts and runes? Attempt to make a masterpiece to be molded out of an apex predator? Or does he defy the logic of magical war entirely and kill it early, choosing vulnerability over the corrupting comfort of an underground superweapon? How do others respond to that choice? Does Snape, who understands both serpents and boys who traffic in secrets, try to redirect the bond? Does Ginny, once she survives the diary, seek out the chamber herself to reclaim agency from the monster that almost wrote her ending? Does Draco attempt to claim the basilisk as Slytherin inheritance, forcing Harry to define publicly whose legacy this creature truly serves? And if this door can open once, what adjacent doors tempt you next? Imagine a variant where Draco is the first to find the sink and speak. A Hogwarts where Dumbledore abandons ambiguity and openly weaponizes the basilisk as a state-sanctioned deterrent. Or a darker branch in which Voldemort returns not to the Forbidden Forest, but to the chamber itself, reclaiming Slytherin's monster as his personal familiar before the Second War even begins. The comment section is the next level of the chamber. Unlit corridors of theory, hidden alliances between interpretations, new doors waiting for the right password. Leave your version of Harry's choices below. Map out your preferred variant branches. And if you want to keep descending into these deep, ominous fault lines in the Harry Potter timeline, subscribe and stay with us. The castle has more rooms. The war has more beginnings. And the next door is already listening.